there have been hugely complex societies, and on a very limited scale there still are, in which literacy is not a necessary precondition of participation in society, up to a point. There are societies in which orality is, at least one could say, far more important than literacy, and in some cases the society is truly illiterate. That doesn't mean it's unsophisticated or particularly simple. But certainly in the predominant Western cultures, literacy is the basis of it, and literacy is created and up to a point sustained by the existence of the sorts of materials which have until very recently typically been found principally in libraries. Now so the relationship between library and democracy is actually quite a complex one, but it's a very real one. And it's much, much more than simply being a place where people can go and read about things in a free and uncontrolled way. It's much more fundamental than that, because, as I say, it's related to the education system, which ultimately underpins people's ability to take a reasoned decision, which might underlie a vote, or at an even more fundamental level, their understanding that a vote is something worth having and worth casting.
Libraries don't usually threaten people. They may sometimes threaten societies. They may threaten governments, which is not quite the same thing. There haven't been many examples in Britain of this, but if you think back to, again, the national independence movements in the Balkans, say in the 1830s, 1840s, when in Croatia, for example, they were struggling to get free from the Austrian hegemony, the Austrian Empire. There were a lot of libraries there which were being set up by the intellectuals and middle-class people, which were feeding revolutionary thought. They were buying books that couldn't be acquired by people on the open market. They were providing material that was supposed to be inflammatory. And they were closed down by the authorities. The Austrian police would come in and close it down. And this
what year?
This is leading up to 1848, which was the great year of revolutions in Europe. There have been other problems too. I mean, even in Britain, when before the 1850 Public Libraries Act went through Parliament, which first allowed towns to set up public libraries using public money, there was some interesting opposition to the idea, and this went on locally as well. One MP in particular is famous for having said that public libraries are a bad thing. They will only educate the lower classes, and that we don't want educated lower classes. They will not be content with their status in life, and they will become discontented, and they will be less happy, and libraries therefore are a bad thing.
You know, no matter how many passports I have, it always says Lahore, Pakistan. I take all my passports, including my grandmother's passport. And as you can see, she's born in a terrorist country as well. She's visited a bunch of terrorist countries. Who I really am. Yeah, there we go. British subject, also born in a terrorist country. Have I been to any terrorist countries here? Pakistan, yes. A visit to, well, the States. We can hardly claim them to be a terrorist country. This in fact has my IMM 1000, which proves that I arrived in Canada from London on the 2nd of March, 1966. Cancelled. Valid. Terrorist valid here. Yes, I'm afraid so. Egypt, is that a terrorist country? I'm not sure. Current Canadian passport is here. Here's my old British passport. I have been to some country which has terrorist script. And it expires on the 10th of September, not the 11th of September, as it suggests here. I think that's the year that they're referring to, 2011. Here we go. 3 proving my my European nationality, 5 proving my Canadian nationality, plus my current passports, the European one and the country. It is required that I will be fingerprinted and a taped interview, and goodness, maybe I just won't go. Maybe, what's the point? movie land card. Maybe that would be as good as my British passport. My membership at Blockbuster, I wonder if that would work. And then I have a credit card, that might work. I have a health card here. Will this work? Membership card for Boîte Noire, where I get all my videotapes. By the way, it's a very good video rental place. I have a health card. Tom Twist has been kind enough to say, well, if you can't come to America to interview me, I'll come to Canada to be interviewed. I've never met Tom Twist before, but he's tall, has a goatee, and we've got this to help us find him.
I'm a government information librarian at the University of Pittsburgh, and we're a federal depository, which means we receive a large percentage of federal documents free of charge and include them in our collection. One thing that concerns us a great deal and concerns all depository librarians is that increasingly we're seeing the removal of the availability of government information that previously had been accessible on the web. And this has especially been a problem since 9/11 because a lot of information is being removed for security reasons from government websites. And the problem is that this makes it increasingly difficult for the public to monitor government activities, to keep informed about what's happening in a lot of different areas. All this happens at the same time that we have the Patriot Act, which has been passed in the United States, which has made it much easier for agents of the FBI to come to libraries and request information about library users, materials that individuals are looking at within libraries, websites individuals are examining, that sort of thing. So the ironic thing is that at this point, libraries are becoming less and less institutions in which you can access information about their government, and more institutions in which the government can access information about the library users.
If I just pull one book off, quite more or less at random, it's a book of the 19th century, published in 1848 by Harriet Martineau, quite a well-known writer and social activist. She's going on to different parts of Egypt, and in the other volumes she's covering other parts of the Middle East. Hebrew faith at the birth of Christ. This is about part of Jerusalem, I think, called Safad. It's somewhere in Israel. We reached it in about 8 hours from Tiberias. It's an extraordinary place. It's a magnificent crest of some of the loftiest summits in Palestine, towering above every object on this side Lebanon. There are many people who will not leave the place. Numbers are perpetually arriving to live and die at this, the most sacred of the 4 holy cities. And the place declined. It was often retaken by Christians and Mohammedans. Other classes of inhabitants left it, but the Jews remained, and they had a university or printing establishment.
The year 2002, we have a living card catalog.
Oh, yes.
This, I haven't seen in a long time.
It's part of heritage. People need to know about this. You find references to it in novels and in other books. They say, I must look in the card index. If you don't see these things, you don't know what they're talking about.
There's a very special building in East Jerusalem called the Orient House, where the Arab Studies Society is situated, which is very symbolic for Palestinians and for Israelis alike. And in the backside of the building, there's a library. But the military, they went inside and they actually destroyed the subject catalog of the library. And this subject catalog was actually taken out and destroyed by the Israelis at the time they had closed the building. And the people working there, they were not able to come inside the building more or less for 4 years. My last visit to Palestine was before Sharon went to the Temple Mount and the new Intifada started. The new occupations of the cities started. My impression at that time was that there was actually being built an infrastructure on different areas of civil society in Palestine. It was not a joke, it was actually really building important institutions, stone by stone. And I saw this in the library field also. They had an office for Ministry of Culture for developing libraries, children's libraries, school libraries, and they were actually developing this area in a good sense.
March and April of 2002, the Israelis launched a program called Defensive Shield.
Yes.
What was that?
Defensive Shield was a massive military incursion onto the West Bank. And in the course of that incursion, in a large number of institutions, libraries, archives, records, various collections of information resources were seriously damaged or were destroyed. Types of institutions affected ranged from municipal libraries, university libraries, television, radio stations, governmental institutions. Virtually every governmental institution of the Palestinian National Authority on the West Bank was affected. Non-governmental organizations of every type, a Lutheran religious compound. And in these institutions you had various forms of damage and destruction of information resources. You had computers were picked up and smashed on the floor. You had bullets were fired through computer screens. You had journals and books, computer disks confiscated. You had CDs and videotapes smashed with sledgehammers. You had files collected into a room and burned and then urinated upon. Various kinds of destruction like this.
What evidence do you have for this?
Well, the evidence is very extensive, and it comes from sources like the New York Times, the Christian Science Monitor, the Los Angeles Times, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the Boston Globe, as well as a lot of websites, some put out by the institutions themselves, including photographic evidence of what happened. There's also was fairly extensive coverage of this in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and there were some very, very good and very interesting articles and editorials on this question in that paper. There are still people who deny that it happened. The evidence is overwhelming that it did happen. After denying that it happened, some of the same individuals will say, ah yes, but it was accidental. And it was all done in the process of trying to apprehend terrorists. Unfortunately, that interpretation is completely inconsistent with the evidence. You can't pick up and smash a computer accidentally, especially on such a wide scale. Fire bullets through computer screens, smash CDs, videotapes with sledgehammers, urinate or defecate in offices accidentally. And there's no way that these kinds of actions had anything to do with combating terrorism.
The main focus is on anything that gives people the concept of Palestine as a nation, Palestinians as a people with the right to self-rule and to their own nation. Anything that accepts the notion of Palestine as separate from Jordan or as separate from Israel.
The Minister of Culture for the Palestinian National Authority has described this as a case of cultural cleansing. And I believe that the evidence is consistent with this interpretation.
The universities are places where lots of young Palestinians are gathered. They are actually very curious about political issues. They are often radical. And they discuss with professors who have analysis of the situation. So this is really, for the occupation forces, these are dangerous institutions.
Those people are speculating about what the libraries contain, and if they looked at the documentary evidence, they would find it highly unlikely that most of these institutions would have had any significant collection of anti-Semitic literature. I mean, we're talking about institutions like a Lutheran religious compound in Ramallah. We're talking about the Amman Development Center, which had destruction of videos and manuals promoting economic development. We're talking about radio stations that had music, youth music, CDs, that sort of thing. You had the Al-Haq educational television station, which has collaborated with Sesame Street in producing programs. These are not terrorist organizations, and they're not the kinds of institutions that would have been promoting anti-Semitism.
It got kind of Kafkaesque after a while, so you could find George Orwell's 1984, and you can find books that had no direct relation to the situation in Palestine, which was kind of paranoid.
The book 1984 by George Orwell was banned at one point in the late 70s and early 80s. I don't believe it is at this point. But it was on a list of banned books, about 1,600 books that were banned at that time.
You could actually find examples of books being imported by Palestinian libraries from Jordan, being stopped at the Allenby Bridge where the crossover is, confiscated by the Israeli authorities and sent to the Hebrew University, where the people who ordered the books actually could find the ordered books on the shelves in the Hebrew University. So it was the context where the books should be that was dangerous for the Israeli occupation forces. It was not the book itself. The most important problem is the difficulty traveling from one place to another. As you can see of this map, it's divided. Some call it like Bantustans. The gray area is completely Palestinian. The yellow areas are jointly Palestinian and Israeli, and the white areas are Israeli. Every time you change from one color to another, there's a possibility of a checkpoint. If it's a bad day, there's a checkpoint everywhere. If it's a good day, you can pass through. One day the tanks are inside Ramallah, the next day they're outside. So now there is you can't draw a map and say this is the situation in 2002. You have to say which hour and which date actually. A couple of kilometers from a residential area to the downtown in Ramallah, in Beira, in Nablus, in Bethlehem, Beit Jala, in different cities and towns in the West Bank. People are not able to come to their library. They're not able to come to their school. They're not able to come back after school is finished. They're not able to come to hospitals. This is a general problem which affects libraries in a tremendous way. There are big parts of the Israeli society which feel that this is not the right way to go about the question, and they really feel that the Palestinians should have their own state, the self-rule in the West Bank. So the Israeli society is divided in this. Regularly demonstrations in Israel in support of the Palestinian state.
Including the right of return. For example, if someone...
Not the right of return of all refugees, of course not. That's a big political and practical subject. I wouldn't feel comfortable going into that because it's a moral issue and it's a big political, practical issue also. The whole basis of the Oslo Peace Accord was that they tried to solve some questions along the way, and they pushed the big questions in front of them and thought that as they got used to dealing with each other through the years, they would also be able to solve the big questions. There's actually a phrase in Palestine, they say, the Oslo class, which is the ruling class in Palestine, because they came to power through the Oslo Accords. There's an Israeli state which is based on occupying the territory because of their religious right to it and because of the moral support they feel that the history gives them to do this, which is understandable. They have suffered tremendously worldwide, and They have the right to a solution, but this is the wrong solution.
Would you use the word apartheid to describe the society?
Yeah, sure. Let me give you one example of the dilemmas one can be in. When the international library community had a conference in Jerusalem in 2000, we took the people who were interested, which actually showed we had to fill the bus, and even some people couldn't go. There were so many who wanted to leave Jerusalem and go to Bethlehem, see a refugee camp, and to see the library in a refugee camp called Dheisheh outside Bethlehem. And lots of the people, they come from Japan, from United States, they came from Europe, different countries. And when they saw this refugee camp and they saw how hard they were trying to develop their library, their cultural center in the midst of this refugee camp, which was cramped, really dense population there. On the bus back, some of the people said, "Oh, this is bad. We have to support them. Let's send around a hat to gather some money, and we can give them some money." And then you immediately noticed two kind of reactions in the bus. Some people said, "This is good. Yeah, we want to support." And the other part said, "This is a good intention, but it's a poor way of dealing with it to gather some small money. This is a big political issue. Somebody from the United States should go back home and tell the politicians what they should not continue doing, instead of gathering some few coins in a bus." This is the dilemma I feel when I come back from Palestine. So you have to find a solution to the problem, and the big political issue is so directly linked to the support Israel gets from the United States. If it didn't get that support money-wise and morally, then they would have been forced to the table to discuss solutions which would be fair for both parties.
There's an ongoing war against the most disadvantaged, the most dispossessed of the world. It's nothing new. It's been happening for a long time, and we're seeing an intensification of it in a lot of ways. We're seeing an intensification of it within the United States at the moment.
How do you mean?
An attack on democratic rights that is accompanied by attacks on the environment, attacks on the labor movement within the United States, and so on.
A Problem from Hell, America and the Age of Genocide. And the longest chapter is about how America supported Saddam Hussein in using chemical weapons against his own people and against the Iranians. Was it American arrogance? Was it their self-confidence that everything would be under control? This is the puzzling question.
There was certainly looting of a disorganized, impromptu manner. And there was also some anger directed at icons of the former regime.
There was proof of outside orchestration on the museum, on the looting of the Iraqi museum. And now it's almost all the pieces that have been stolen came back. This could be used as an evidence for some other things, but for the library, I cannot say that. I can say that about the museum because no spontaneous act of sabotage or looting would be organized in such a meticulous way, you know. People were being led to number the closets, knowing that in closet number whatever, in the floor X or Y, at the hall X or Y, you will go there, you will pick the small pieces numbered with the specific numbers. That's clearly an organized crime, okay? An organized crime by insiders who knew what to go and what to fetch.
Jean-Marie Arnoux, who's the Inspector General of Libraries in France for the French government, went on a UNESCO mission in late June, early July. And he produced some incredibly moving images of the damage and destruction that had occurred to a number of libraries and archives in Baghdad and Basra and Mosul. And in some of that, he was convinced there had been some deliberate planned attempt. And there was clearly an attempt to destroy the libraries and their contents by bringing material together in one place and with some chemicals setting fire to them, because books don't burn as easily as all that. And there was ash, book ash, this deep. People were putting their hands in front of the cameras into this ash. And you could see in other places where people had gathered material together to burn with, and they'd been disturbed.
This is the Divina Commedia of Dante, first edition, printed in Venice, 1472.
May I touch it?
Yeah, sure.
It's very thick. It feels very thick and
Yeah,
substantial.
sure, but it's flexible. I mean, that's good for another 500 years.
So there was some very deliberate attempt to destroy, but there was also apparently, particularly in the museum areas, but also in some of the libraries, to take away stuff that had been preordained, so that the material could be later sold, maybe to people who already indicated they wanted it beforehand.
If material that was suspected as coming from the Iraqi libraries or museums appeared on the market, the international scholarly community now would automatically inform the relevant Iraqi authorities about it. I don't think there would be any question of buying it. I mean, there are lots of collections that have been gathered from countries all over the world that have reached a point of stability now, and I think that modern ethos would prevent curators from going out and buying suspect material.
There are many people who are buying these books back and waiting for the library to go back to action, and they will bring these books back to it. There's a concerted international effort by many wonderful intellectuals all over the world trying to track where these books from the signs of the National Library. There are people who told me that they have it in their homes. They have some of these collections waiting for the library to go back to action, and they will bring these books back.
Some material had been taken away for safekeeping beforehand, before the war started. So some of that has been stored, but much of it is in very unsuitable premises. There's about 200,000 books taken from, and other documents taken from the National Library in Baghdad to a mosque, and it's just all piled up in a single room with no ventilation, just stacked up, thrown in, and he reckons there's about 200,000 there, and it will deteriorate very rapidly in those conditions. We hear on the news that the temperature there is in excess of 40 degrees centigrade.
The National Library was subjected to looting and burning twice, the 14th and after a week from that. It's composed of two parts. The back part of it is all locked and it has not been damaged at all. The front part of it is looted. I would say it's 100% looted. Now, out of that, there are collections that you cannot know for now how much of it is in the hands of people who are planning to bring it back. But the damage is extensive.
Mr. Arnoux made some estimates of the percentage of material that had been lost from some of the libraries, and in most cases it appeared to be about 30%.
In times of war, cultural properties are supposed to be protected by the Hague Convention, but not every country has signed up to it yet. I do know that it is the intention of Ireland to sign it in the near future.
The Hague Convention has a second protocol established in 1999, and it will come into force when 20 member states of the UN ratify it. And the effect of that will be twofold. One is to give enhanced protection to designated cultural property and collections, not just buildings, but collections, once they've been agreed by the International Committee. And secondly, it introduces the concept of a cultural war crime, so that if it can be proved that a commander or anybody deliberately attacks or destroys or damages a library building, for example, in war, that person can be tried at international court.
I would imagine that the international community would work very hard to reconstitute those collections, and I would say that it would be very difficult to market the well-known pieces, the recorded pieces, without them being traced and retrieved.
What we did in the case of Iraq was we wrote to President Bush and Prime Minister Blair and Saddam Hussein saying that they should protect the cultural property in Iraq in the event of war breaking out. And that was in March, just before war broke out. When it did break out, we asked them to protect the cultural property. And patently, they did not do so. Well, I had no reply from Saddam Hussein, I had no reply from Tony Blair, but I have had a reply from the National Security Council in the USA, saying they were doing all they could.
National Library was established in the late 70s with the aim of amassing the best collection of books in Iraq. There was a law ordering that each newly published book should be catalogued and put in that library. And this was consulted by researchers, by students, by all sorts of people who are interested. And Iraqis are known, I mean, there was, in the old days, there was a saying that, you know, Cairo writes, Beirut publishes, and Baghdad reads. Eventually, Baghdad began to publish and write also, not only read. So we are heavy consumers of printed material. When you go to Al-Mutanabbi Street, as I have been going, this is a street which has been traditionally the street of libraries and bookshops, the commercial ones. When you see all kinds of books being there for sale, and when you see the flourishing trade in books, when you see a flourishing trade in photocopying the latest books and just putting them for sale, and the prices are they are priced according to the number of pages and how many. When you see all that, when you see that despite all the misery, the financial misery and the political misery of the people are going there, people are buying books, people are trading in books, I would say we have not, our people has not been corrupted as much as one would fear under such a brutal regime and under 3 wars, 12 years of sanctions. I'm not quite pessimistic. All depends on Iraq regaining its ordinary life as a country.
People don't sufficiently realize the importance of libraries in this context. They see them very often as luxuries, low-level institution. Nice to have if you've got enough money as a society, but you can do without them. But actually, no civilization can do without libraries. And if you don't have libraries, people can't make up their own minds, they can't take control of their own lives, they can't be sufficiently skeptical about the powers that be.
Iraq was the cradle of writing, it was the cradle of city civilization as we understand it, and it was part of the area in which the whole concept of agriculture and settled society, as we know it in the Western world, first developed. So it is at the core of what makes us what we are today. And I mean, people, even those of us who don't study Iraqi archaeology and history, would be very conscious of the importance of the great sites, or the Sumerian civilization, which had such a huge impact on the world, and within which writing was invented. And we are talking here about the roots of history.
Why would Iraqis want to destroy their own culture?
I wouldn't put it as Iraqis, I would put it as some Iraqis, because actually up till now it's easy to say that it's the remnants of the Ba'athist regime, which is a very probable hypothesis, but there is no evidence on that. I would say there are people who are, it's you know, sometimes you can, it's a mixture of so many motives. Sabotage, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Second, 35 years of oppression lead to some kind of destructive enjoyment of your liberty. And we've seen that in post-Franco Spain, we've seen that in post-Salazar Portugal, and in Eastern Europe, unfortunately.
I have to look at my notes. I wouldn't stress the importance of libraries too much. Even though I'm a librarian, I wouldn't do that.
We fell victims of our euphoria for the fall of Saddam. This gave the false impression to the Americans that we are doing fine, we don't need Iraqis. When I saw that the Americans were intent on not allowing Iraqis to play that role, to give advice, etc., I just felt that I am being just a witness to occupation, just a collaborator with an occupation force.
I mean, having a summer camp of Israeli and Palestinian children understanding each other is a very, very good thing. But what does that amount to when you pour in billions of dollars in the military in Israel?
How much would the strength of Iraq alter the balance of power? This dreaded word that I hate so much. You labeled the Iranians as members of an axis of evil. You labeled Syrians as a country sponsoring terrorism. You gave clear messages to Saudi Arabia that we want to overthrow your regime. And I cannot understand a humiliated, defeated, weakened Iraq being surrounded by countries that are looking at it as a staging point to overthrow them. How would we cope? And the lessons of geography teach us that no country can escape from its geography, no matter who its ally is. It's a world conflict, the conflict of interest between two equally egoistic interests. The French, who wanted to keep their interests in Iraq, the French and the Russians on the one hand, and the Americans. I don't see the French and the Russians are more honest or more intent on helping the Iraqi people or any other people on earth. The French, who helped the Rwandans, the genocide, the beasts of Rwanda, who helped Bukasa in Africa, the children killer, and so on, and so, who helped Saddam Hussein. And now to tell me that they are so sad about the fate of the Iraqi people? I mean, come on, they have been supporting Saddam Hussein and all the fascists in the Arab world and elsewhere for decades now.
Even though this generation may accept it as, okay, this is better than a pure occupation, the children of those people making this peace accord are going to protest against it, say this is impossible.
I'm afraid that there will be a backlash against anything that's Western, anything that is related or associated with democracy, liberalism, openness to the West. Look what the West has brought us. Look at all this talk about democracy. This is terrifying to me.